Turn off your phones.
Yes, turn off your phones.
Lower your phones.
Turn off your phone, Herman. And then he'd say, yep, and then 20 minutes later it rang. I said I turned it off. Kim's like, give it to me.
Madam Mayor, it's 6:05 and we are live.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Lake Worth Beach Utility City Commission meeting at the Chambers on Tuesday, April 26, 2022. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Yes, Madam Mayor, Mayor Betty Resch,
Here.
Vice Mayor Christopher McVoy,
Here.
Commissioner Sarah Maliga,
Present.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes,
Here.
Commissioner Reynaldo Diaz.
Here. Thank you. Now we'll have the pledge led by Commissioner Diaz.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, are there any additions, deletions, or reordering?
No, Madam Mayor. However, I do need two motions. One to reschedule the May 5th meeting back to May 3rd, and another to reschedule the May 17th meeting to May 19th. Two separate motions, please.
First motioned.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Second motion.
All in favor? Oh, second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And I apologize.
Fine.
No worries.
Okay, so interesting commission agenda tonight. And we've done that. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I have one public comment
Oh,
from Khalith Green, 59 Davis Road. Last August or September, I think there was talk of hiring people for some type of compliance for the power lines, and also hiring some other people or outsourcing those jobs based on some discussion the city was having for the electric. Whatever happened with that, since it was said that the city would be having its compliance checked in June? Did we ever hire the people, or do we outsource their jobs to someone else? Do we need to hire these people to help with outages the city has been having lately? That is the end of my public comments.
thank you. All right.
Next email this, right?
Next is the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next is the approval of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. New business. Now we're new business A, the exercise of city's extension rights under the OUC Supplemental Energy and Capacity Agreement. Mr. Liberty,
Take it away.
take it away.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. For the record, Ed Liberty, Electric Utility Director, I'll be speaking on this item. OUC refers to Orlando Utility Commission, and supplemental contract refers to the energy and capacity contract under which we receive power from OUC. OUC actually does a number of things for us. We have generation entitlements already, separate from OUC, in various Florida Municipal Power Agency projects that we've had since the 1980s, most notably the Stanton project and the St. Lucie project. In addition to that, we have our own power plant, which includes our fossil fuel assets there, totaling approximately 88 megawatts. And then we also have a 1.7 megawatt solar project. OUC's responsibility under the contract is to first make sure that the energy that's produced from the assets, which we have ownership interests in, which are what we call our generation entitlements, is delivered to us monthly. However, that only represents roughly 39 and some months as much as 50% of our total energy needs. That means that the remainder, the 50% of our energy needs, are fulfilled by OUC under the supplemental agreement. In addition to providing us with that power, and we'll talk about the pricing in a minute, they also schedule it to get here. Much like we can't show up at the airport today and hope that there's a seat to fly to Atlanta. we actually have to make a reservation on the transmission system to get that power here. One of OUC's jobs in this contract is to make sure that reservation is made in the transmission system in order to get that power here. The way the contract works was we nominate with them monthly. So by the end of this month, we will nominate the June energy that we expect to need and capacity. And they will make sure that they schedule it accordingly. And then they send it to us. We do audit their bills very closely. When we started the relationship with OUC was actually selected back in 2014, actually late 2013. And the first contract with OUC started in January of 2014. That contract ran this course and expired after 5 years. In 2018, we went out for a bid again in a very competitive bid process, and OUC won the bid again against very stiff competition from Florida Power and Light and the Florida Municipal Power Agency. They were $2+ million a year, I believe, lower in cost to us than the competing source than the competitors. We obviously did select OUC for a contract that began in January of 2019. That contract helped us reduce our costs by about $20 per megawatt hour. What does that mean? That means about $9 million. So our annual power bill went down by about $9 million beginning in 2019 from what it was prior to that. And we have extensive data that proves that out. So it's been a very, very good contract for us. It's had a number of features, and I have to be somewhat cautious because, as some of you have noted, there are large portions of the contract which are redacted. That is by contractual agreement, and we're legally able to redact that. That's at the request of the bidder. And that's not unusual in power markets. But certainly all of you, or any of you, in a one-on-one, we could go through the details of that at any time. If you would want to see that, we could walk you through it.
And that's because that's their proprietary information.
Correct. It's proprietary trade secret. The same thing will apply to the FMPA solar projects, which we have not begun receiving power from, but that same concept applies. Those are confidential agreements. That information on pricing is a trade secret to the provider of the power, which is in the companies that are selling to FMPA, then selling to us. But be that as it may, the OUC contract has been very good. It had a 4-year initial term, followed by 3 1-year extension terms for a total of 7 years. Feature in the contract, though, that was very important to us, there have been many features, but this one was important as well, was that at the end of the 4th year, we have that option as to whether we want to employ them for the 5th year. The notice provisions requires to give that notice by, I believe, June 1. So by June 1 of this year, we need to give them affirmative notice that we intend to exercise our 1-year extension rights for calendar 23. My recommendation is the commission that we do in fact do that. We do not have the option of the contract of just remaining silent and say, well, if we don't tell them we want to leave, we're okay, right? No, we have to do it in the affirmative and say, no, we want to stay. It's been a very good contract for us, and it's allowed us to have very, very competitive prices. There is an awful lot of transparency. Formula is very well known by us, even though it's redacted because we can't share it. But it's eminently auditable. We do review those bills in detail every month, and OUC has been very, very helpful and very conscientious, and in some cases have actually gone beyond to our benefit what the contract would actually allow them to do. So they've been a very, very good partner in this endeavor, and we would recommend that you do, in fact, give me the authorization to give notice by June 1 that we intend to extend the first 1 year's term.
Great, thank you. I have to make one comment, and that was you had put something on. Chris had it on Facebook about these items, and I responded saying, "Did you talk to Ed?" And I've been advised that we really need to be careful about what we put on Facebook, that it becomes public record. And you know, it's so easy just to do it. So there's no violation here, but Chris and I have not spoken about this, but I just want to put that in there now, so to satisfy our attorney, because she's very demanding.
She's little but mighty.
Little but mighty. Thank you very much for that. It's a good reminder. It really is. So I see a light on. We have a question.
I have a question. So if this was approved in 2018, my question was, why is everything still for Lake Worth Beach?
Because at that point, we were Lake Worth. The contracts were written with Lake Worth Beach, so the contracts would have to all be changed to say Lake Worth Beach. But in 2018, when this contract was negotiated, we were still Lake Worth.
Well, no, our election's in March and this was done in June, right?
It was a process.
I like that answer. Can we just make sure that everything in here is changed to Lakewood Beach and page 32 reflects our current name as well when we go through?
I believe that we legally, I've been told, we can use either name. They are both legally acceptable.
But if we want everybody else to stop saying Lake Worth.
I mean, I don't disagree with you, but this is pretty obscure.
No, I was asking because to me, I mean, we had the election in March and if this was done in June, but you're telling us because it took some time to put the contract together, that they just overlapped each other. Okay, that was my only question. Second on the motion to.
Well, Commissioner Malia has her light on.
No, that's.
Oh, yeah.
I know, we look so much alike.
I just wanted to double check. So nothing in this contract is changing. We're just extending it out. All the conditions are the same that we've been.
Correct, absolutely no changes in terms and conditions at all. None.
Okay, that's all.
Thank you. I have a second from Commissioner Malia.
Yep.
Favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Item B, establishing the purchase power cost adjustment in electric utility rates for the period of June 1st, 2022 through August 31st, 2022.
Good evening.
Good
Once
evening.
again, Ed Liberty for the record, Electric Utility Director. I'm not sure if I need to keep saying that over and over. And might be important for folks
It's the Ed Show.
and listening at home. Okay, so PCA, what is PCA? PCA is a power cost adjustment. So I recognize that most of you, if not all of you, already know what this is, but important I'm speaking to the audience, which may not understand these issues because they don't work with them every day. But PCA is a power cost adjustment. It's the mechanism by which the utility, any utility for that matter, this is very common. I've never seen a utility that did not have a PCA for that matter. Utilities recover their cost of buying power or buying fuel, depending on which it is, directly from their customers on a periodic basis. And what the utility does at the start of the period, which we did, effective January 1, we set our PCA rate to start the year. In the resolution, which has existed for many years here in Lake Worth Beach, there was a feature referring to the PCA and how it should be calculated and that it should be done annually. At the December 2021 meeting, by request of the commission, we changed that to quarterly. That's not necessarily bad that we did that. But we went ahead and did it and decided we're going to review our power cost every quarter to determine what that adjustment should be, if any. Power for us and for many utilities in the country is driven largely by the cost of fossil fuel. We, however, do have a big advantage because over 38, close to 39% of our power does not come from fossil fuel. It comes from a fixed cost resource, our own small solar plant. It's 1.7 megawatts and the 22 megawatts that we get from the FMPA St. Lucie project. Those two items together equal about 39% of our total power. So one way to look at this is that 39% of the power that we buy for our customers is not at all subject to the current volatility of natural gas prices or oil or coal prices. The flip side is if you want to look at the other half of the cup, you'd say that, hey, only 60% of the stuff that we buy is subject to vulnerability in fuel price. So we have a PCA and the resolution requires us to look at this quarterly. So that's what we've done. So when we did the math, we pull up all of the numbers and you have that in a sheet in front of you, but I can put it up on the screen because this is slightly, it's more illustrative for the public than what was in the backup. So I'm going to see if I can share the screen real quick here.
And I assume since you're sharing these numbers are okay to be out and it's not a trade secret thing.
Correct.
Otherwise, he's in trouble.
Well, he's
Otherwise, we got bigger
so
issues.
He wouldn't put them out if he couldn't. So I think it's okay.
Okay, what you should have is in the documents which I just handed out a few minutes ago, which is the actual PCA calculation.
Which is in part of backup as well.
It's provided in more detail than the latest one I just provided for you.
So should help on enlarging it, I'm guessing.
And the resolution, and this, by the way, this for those of you at home looking at this, we're looking at a table that's called power cost adjustment calculation. The resolution spells out exactly how this calculation is supposed to be undertaken. So we talk about PCA equals A plus B equals C, the cumulative sum of those divided by D. What is all of that stuff, right? So A is what we project our power cost to be for the next 3 months. In this case, the next 3 months would be April, May, and June. We are projecting those power costs to be $4.8 million. And I'm going to round numbers instead of reading whole number. So we're projecting those power costs to be 4.8 million. And I'm going to come back and talk about those in a little bit more detail. But what's in there? What's in there is the FMPA Stanton 1 variable costs, the FMPA municipal solar project power costs, supplemental purchase power capacity, energy, and directly related costs, i.e. the OUC contract, and the Lake Worth Beach Electric Utility power generating fuel and transmission costs. So Lake Worth Beach Electric Utility power generating fuel is the fuel that we need to run our own plant when we choose to run it. And transmission costs are what it costs us to get the power here from the source. We actually have to pay for space on the transmission system to get it here. So I'm going to go to the next slide for a second, and we're going to come back to this. And what I want to do is provide you with a breakdown of what is in item A. Just a second while I get the slide to advance. I get this right. Not getting it right.
He came in to do something bigger, but it may not have made it very advanced. Yeah, there you go.
Worked. Okay. Not wired right. So item A, as I mentioned, is made up of multiple components. So what you can see in this table is our estimate of each one of those components for April, May, and June. So let's go through that. This one is the Stanton project cost. That's Stanton 1, which we've been a part of since the mid-1980s. It's over its course of its life been a coal unit. However, it does not always burn coal. It burns a combination of coal and natural gas. And even though coal is not natural gas, there's a lot of talk lately about natural gas prices. Coal, however, does somewhat follow the opportunity of the market for a BTU. Whether it's coal or natural gas or oil, we're always talking about BTUs, right? The British Thermal Unit of Energy. And they're all competitive fuels. What's also happening is that these fuels are very competitive. So we say, well, how can coal be tracking natural gas? Well, most people don't think this through like we do in our business, but the coal has to come out of the ground. I'm not advocating for the environmental benefits or non-benefits of coal. It comes to reality that it comes out of the ground. And then it has to move by rail to the power plant where it's going to be burned. Well, that rail is powered by a locomotive. That locomotive is powered with fuel oil, right? Mm-hmm. In the rail contracts for the Stanton plant, we as owners, FMPA, OUC, over the years, successfully renegotiated those contracts so that a portion of the delivery cost of getting the coal to the plant was in fact tied to natural gas prices. So even though the locomotives weren't fueled by natural gas, you got some price benefit by having them tied to natural gas. So that $46,000, $150,000, $149,000, that's what we expect the cost of power to be from the Stanton plant in each one of those months.
And just out of curiosity, why the jump of 100,000 from April to May? Is that mostly the fuel oil for the trains, or?
No. The delivery cost is not a huge component. It's an important component, but it's probably running more hours.
What's that?
Probably running more hours. Electric generating units are dispatched on the least cost basis first. So we have for every unit in a power pool, we have the lowest cost unit and the most expensive unit. So imagine for the moment that you've had a fleet of taxi cabs, and you've had a taxi cab that got 35 miles a gallon and one that got 12 miles a gallon. You say, well, I want to run that 35 mile per gallon taxi cab all the time, and only want to run that really expensive one some of the time. So this unit is probably being dispatched more hours, anticipated to be dispatched more hours in May and June, which makes sense
Because we're getting hotter.
it's going to be hotter, more electric demand. So these units are run on an economic basis. They're just what we call dispatched in a cost model or a cost stack. That's the way they're dispatched. and they're dispatched based on a variable cost to operate the plant. The fixed costs are sunk. These are just variable operating costs, which is really primarily fuel. The labor is already at the plant. You have the fuel in it. This is the cost to put the fuel in it. And we've already anticipated how much power we need to buy. And we look at the sources, the resources, say this is where it's probably going to come from. The next line item is Florida municipal solar power.
Not fired up yet.
Not fired up, right? It's at zero. They're still under construction. However, when we're having this discussion in 2023, you'll start to see numbers populate in there.
Now, will those numbers be positive or negative?
Positive.
But why are they positive? What is the cost? The variable cost associated with them?
We did not make a capital investment in these plants. We have what's referred to as power purchase agreements, effectively power purchase agreements. It means that we pay for the power and unit costs as it's being produced.
Yeah, we're buying power off the thing.
Right.
Correct. No capital investment on our part.
However, the price, if one were to put that as a dollars per kilowatt, the price might be lower than what we're paying for something else, or it should be a little bit lower.
I'm going to tiptoe carefully around the confidentiality of the price, but what is publicly disclosed is that the price would be under 4 cents per kilowatt hour.
So it should be lower.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe.
The next section that's defined in the resolution for item A is supplemental energy capacity costs. Now, we just talked about that. That's effectively the OUC contract. Right? So we're expecting that for capacity, we'd be paying those numbers that you see there, and for energy-related costs, the numbers you see there. That's the total purchase in each of those months that we anticipate under the OUC contract. By the way, this all ties back to our models. We didn't just make these numbers up and throw them on a whiteboard and say, hey, this looks good. Just tell them, no, this all tracks back to our models. This number is largely driven by natural gas prices.
Yeah.
Right? That's inherent within the OUC contract. And I have to be careful again how far I go, but it's driven by natural gas prices. So we know the relationship that exists between the cost of power and the cost of natural gas. And that's how we're able to predict what these numbers would be.
What are you using to predict the cost of natural gas? Because we don't know the cost right now.
Correct. We don't know the future cost of natural gas. So we use as a proxy what the natural gas futures contracts are trading at.
Like today
Yeah.
or a week ago or a month ago or an average?
Well, I'm going to show you some slides. We're going to get into great detail, and I have some slides prepared for that. You're leading the witness, I think, is what counts.
That's what I'm interested in.
Yes. We'll show you that mechanism.
Boy, there's lots of lawyers in the room today. I like
It's
that.
cross-examination, so you can do it. It's fine.
I just Googled that word.
And then we have transmission costs. So transmission costs are what we pay to get the tower here. And that bill actually gets paid to Florida Power and Light. Those rates are set by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They're published rates, just like our rates are published. They have rates for the use of the transmission system. That's simply a multiplier of our contribution to their peak demand, what we call the coincidental peak. So if their peak demand is at, let's pick an easy number, at 50,000 megawatt hours at a certain time, it's the time when they peak. And what is our peak at that time? So what is our contribution to that peak, what we call the coincidental peak? So if we happen to be, let's say, at 90 megawatts, when we peaked at 50,000, you take the 90 megawatts times the unit rate, that drives our payment for the month. So it's driven by our peak demand.
So in theory, and I don't think it would make financially a whole lot of difference, but in theory, if we could shift our peak off of their peak, we'd save a little bit on transmission costs. If we had it, now could we technically do that at a price that would make much difference, since your total bill is 200,000, it's not that big a chunk out of it.
Our peaks are already slightly different. I don't have the exact timing.
Are we
Probably not.
the peak usage time?
Yes, yeah, peak hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me make sure
I mean, FPL controls the transmission lines, and when it's full, they don't want to cook the lines, so they charge you more on the peak. So if you could move it off,
right.
but it's not going to make a big difference.
There is I just checked with Brian King, Assistant Director of Power Generation for our city,
Thank you.
on my staff. There's a few hours difference between our peak and the FPL peak. So FPL's peak is somewhere usually between 4 and 5 p.m. Our peak is 2 to 3 hours later.
Because we're working class people.
Working.
We're only
So-
slightly shifted.
But the transmission costs are not tied to natural gas
Not at all. Transmission cost is purely the space in the wire to move the power here.
So that's predictable and steady.
It is very predictable because it's all driven by what you think your peak is going to be. And we track these numbers monthly. We have spreadsheets go back a decade or more, and we track it very, very closely.
And so that number is basically temperature driven, the transmission cost.
It is. We do track in our models our peak load and our total kilowatt hours that we deliver to our customers per degree day and per what we call per customer month. And actually, our energy, the energy that we deliver to customers per customer is actually decreased slightly on a per customer basis over prior years. So if you were to take a snapshot back 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and you take a look at how much energy we deliver to a customer today on a per customer month basis, it's actually decreased slightly.
Good.
You know, we're delivering more energy in total because we have more customers.
Right.
The amount of energy per customer has gone down.
Usage has gone
So
down.
then
Our peaks have gone down as well. Our peaks are 97.2. We haven't been there in 2 to 3 years now. Our peak has gone down as well.
So most of the change from the previous quarter is in the OUC part, and most of that is natural gas.
Correct. And I'm going to get into some details on how that's calculated. We can jump into that for a second. Okay, we're going to load you up with a whole bunch of information on prices here. There's 4 lines on this curve. First one is the blue line. And what is that? So you notice it starts in October and everything goes out through September. So this is basically the fiscal year in which we were looking at energy prices. Is where natural gas prices, we were looking at futures. So the only way that I have to tell you what natural gas is going to sell for in March, or February, April, May, is to look at what the futures contracts are trading at. I could place my own bet, but if I was really, really good at that, we probably wouldn't be talking tonight.
You'd have your own island somewhere.
Really?
Exactly. But the reality is we need a way to forecast and we need it to be transparent, right? We need it to be fair. And the most objective way that we know how to do that is say, let's pick what the market says. Now, the market is comprised of buyers and sellers. For every buyer, there's a seller, right? But this is what the market was saying at the time that was going to happen with natural gas prices.
Wow.
Now, again, and I said again, I want to point out that when we talk futures prices, that may be different than what you can actually buy gas at that day. So today we can look ahead and say, hey, the market is saying gas is going to be at, let's pick a number, $7 6 months from now. Well, you could buy that contract now and speculate on that. You may find in the 6 months that it may be below that,
So you've,
or it could be higher than that. Right.
you've lost money if it's lower.
Correct. So if you're locked in, on the other hand, and we don't do this, you could use it as a hedge. So you could use a financial hedge against your physical cost. And you say, hey, I don't care what the physical cost is. I'm locked in with this contract because I've got a contract to buy it. So if gas happens to go higher, I'm protected. But if gas happens to go lower, I'm in trouble. We don't speculate that way. I want the public to know and you all to know. We're not speculating that way. We are just using this to forecast what the price may be in the future. The price that we pay is today's spot price. That's it.
Which is 6.7 something,
Is
right?
there a way to get those on the same, like, graph? So this is all, everything on this, every line here is pure speculation based on something.
We'll show
And
you
the next
actual.
graph is what actually happens.
Correct.
I just want to see how good they are. I want to be able, like get those.
You're trying to do comparisons of what the futures market predicted and what it actually.
How accurate are they? Yeah.
Spot prices.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have that, but we can try to assemble something like that in the future. So the blue line is what the market was telling us when we were setting our budgets for the year, when we're getting ready for our budget workshops in July, August, September. That's what the blue line was saying. The next line over is the orange line. Remember, that's what we did was we came to you with a rate increase suggestion, which we approved in December for effective January 1. At that time, we were looking at the orange line.
Right.
Right, no longer the blue line. And what changed was, well, the orange line came down slightly to what we call the front months, right through March. But the orange line turned out to be, was predicting gas prices that were higher through the summer than the old blue line. So we used the orange line at that time when we set the PCA that we have today. So when you pay your bill today, you're using a PCA that's tied to that orange line. Let's look at the yellow line, which is April 11th. So by the rules of our commission, we prepare these packets for you a couple of weeks in advance of the meeting. So what we did literally, I think the day before we were due, was 200 days before the packet was due, we looked at the futures prices. And we use what's called the futures strips. So you can, as the term in industry, you look at, if you look at the next 3 months, that's a 3-month strip. You can look at a 6-month strip, 12-month strip, 18-month strip. It's pretty hard to go beyond 3 years if you use the strips. And that's what you're looking at here. So at that point, just a few weeks ago, the yellow line is what the market was telling us prices would be.
So I want the spaghetti model, from the hurricanes, right? Because like you get them every day, it shifts, and then somewhere in there is like what you think might actually happen, because it just seems like any given day, you pick a line, but 2 days before, 2 days later, it's just shifting.
But I think that's a good thing of why we're doing this every quarter.
Until you have to say, I need to run for it. I need to batten down the hatches, I need to lock in, we need to set a number someplace. So what's here, if you look at the gray line, where's the gray line? Well, that's one we did last night.
That's what I said. I mean, that's why it's good that we're doing this every quarter, because, you know, right now we're in the middle of a world war, let's just call it, which is not helping our fuel cost anywhere or anybody in the world. And hopefully in 2 months from now, we will be in a much better situation and we can reassess.
And all we're doing in this exercise under the 3-month or the quarterly guideline that you gave us that you wanted us to act on, which in hindsight, I think was wise. We're just saying, this is what we think prices are going to be in the next 3 months. We're not going to, we'll see this later in the calculation, you'll see the true period. If it turns out to be less, well,
That's B.
that's it. We'll be able to help customers. As a matter of fact, when we get into the calculation, we actually have a number in B already for the current period, which is actually easing the pain of these sudden increases that we're seeing.
I have almost 500,000.
Next chart, and I just wanted to put this one together a few minutes before I came to the meeting. This is Henry Hub natural gas spot pricing. It's Henry Hub natural gas spot price. So Henry Hub is a physical place in Louisiana. It's an actual place called Henry Hub. And a whole bunch of pipelines all come together in Henry Hub. And the New York Mercantile Exchange trades. They stand on the soapbox in the corner of Broad and Wall, and they shout out prices in the pit, and they scream and yell, and they trade natural gas price at the Henry Hub.
Oh,
That's a published index. You can all go up to any newspaper, go online and day and see, you'll see that number. This looks at what the prices were over a 5-year period. So this is showing you seasonality from March to March in any given year for the past 5-year period and where the actual spot prices went. So let's go into the details about spot price. The spot price is the price of gas at that hub at a given point in time. And you say, well, we're not at the hub. No, there's a difference between price at our power plants that we get fuel from and the spot price. That difference runs to about 12 to 13 or 14 cents per million BTU historically. Why the difference? Gas has more value when it's close to the point where it's needed than when it's not at the point.
Right.
we're far away.
Exactly.
Yeah, like when your car's on E and there's not one exit anywhere near you.
So you pay a lot for gas in that.
Yeah.
Right.
You'll pay a lot less than you could have gotten to the pump, right? So that's basically, we look at this as a proxy, but if you look at those numbers, you would have to increase it by 12 or 13 cents. The point of this slide, one of the commissioners asked, expected, hey, are these numbers seasonal? Well, they're somewhat seasonal in that the higher gas prices tend to occur between the periods of late October into early March. Why? Because it's winter time and there's an awful lot
Somewhere.
It's somewhere, exactly. But we're at the beginning of the pipe. We're on the lateral off the pipe at the end of a long peninsula. And you have a tremendous amount of gas that's going northward to heat homes and also propel industry, heat offices, do all the things that one does with natural gas, and of course, make power with it. But this gives you an idea of seasonal volatility. This next chart, if you wanted to have a data, you say, gee, I can look at this and see trends, and you can see some very interesting things. Well, you can go back in time and say, well, where are we today? So in March of 2022, the monthly average spot is $4.90 a million BTU. But if you just go up a little bit further and go to 2008, we were at 941.
Which one are you looking at?
2008, the line, 2008.
I'm on the wrong.
Yeah, Henry Hub natural gas spot prices. Those numbers were very high. Now, we hope that we don't get there, although you'll see that April of this year is blank because April hasn't closed yet. But we've seen gas trading well above $6.5 to
Yeah.
$7+ already this month, right? 669 is what we're running. So that's my expert there. Thank you. He lives with this every day. He's watching these numbers. That's the monthly average. So that's going up from 490 to 669 is our likely to be our number for April.
And that number of 490 represents, 490 is the cost of
Gas at the Henry Hub in the month of March.
per
Million.
million.
Million BTU is like the equivalent of gasoline. You'd say, I want a gallon of gas. In the natural gas business, I'll take a million BTU.
Well, God, I mean, look at in 2005, in October, it was $13. Jesus,
Yeah, it bounces around.
Right.
that's,
And
13
that's
to
the key
2.
observation of Commissioner Boyd. It doesn't bounce around, but we have to take this number and we work it through our formulas to predict what is power going to cost us.
Yeah,
So we've done this long enough period of time that we have a very good understanding of what the link is between natural gas prices and the cost of the power under the supplemental contract. So we can forecast this. How do we come up with the 4.8? Well, this is one of the things that buried in 4.8. How did your forecast what you see we're going to charge you? Well, we predict how much energy we're going to need. And we look at what the natural gas prices are telling us. We then back into what we think the power will cost us, multiply it times the amount of energy that we're going to buy. Fortunately, for example, our St. Lucie project, which is 39% of our power, isn't moving at all. That's a fixed number.
And
Yeah.
you mentioned this earlier, but one of the reasons for moving to more renewable, such as solar, is the price is fixed. It doesn't change over time. So all this volatility disappears. There are other problems like storage and what do you do at night and all those things, but at least for some of your daytime load, the more we move into renewables, the more insulated we are from price change.
So
Fossil fuel.
we have bought under the FMPA Solar 1 and Solar 2 projects. I can tell you that the price of the power that we bought is well below today's power prices, well below. So we're in the money, we're in the clover here.
wow.
And it's stable.
It's very stable and looking at today's prices persistent next year, it's very good and we're in good shape. Just to impress people with just how much of a commitment we made under Solar 1 and Solar 2, 36.5 megawatts. Well, what does that mean? That means that starting in 2025, for 4 to 6 months of the year, more probably from November through April, there's going to be hours during the day when we have more solar power coming at us than we have a customer to use it. We planned on that. The contracts were so good that we couldn't say no. We anticipated growth because those were 20-year contracts. So it was okay to go along in the early years and say, hey, we're going to be okay. And with all the development that we have coming online, especially with the Gulf Stream, should that come online, we'll eat that up. Downside risk that we have too much. However, it's at such a good price, which I cannot, other than to say what has been publicly said, it's not going to be a problem for us. So we're going to go from, let's say, 39% today sheltered from natural gas prices to somewhere between 58 to 60%.
Wow.
Our energy supply will have zero link to fossil fuels. It will be a known price. One of those contracts actually escalates a few percentage points a year, so it's not very low and escalates slightly. The other one is an actual flat price for 20 years. Those are going to put us in a position where only 40%, beginning in 2025, only 40% of the city's energy supply will be subject to the whims of carbon markets. And it's obviously low carbon as well. So whether you're environmentally driven or economically driven, there's good news under the Christmas tree for everybody as we go into 2025.
If we have too much, can we sell it?
Yes, we would seek to sell
Motion to approve.
You have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Some questions.
Okay. I'm looking for the lights.
Well, he was still presenting. So my question is, back in January, when we had to increase the rates, what number did we use at that time? Like around 4?
Looking at the data here, so the numbers that we would have
The
been
graph, right?
Yeah.
which would have been the
Around 4.
orange line,
Mhm.
would have been in the very high 3s, very close to 4. And then coming down to slightly below 4 in the period of March, April, May, June. Close to 4 is a reasonable number.
And then for this next 3 months, we're plugging in a little over 6.
Correct, a little over 6. And you can see where the line went, if you will, between the gray line and the orange line.
Hmm.
They, for those of us that think about areas under the curve, right?
Yeah.
That space between those two, or the area of that curve, is effectively the amount that it cost us to buy power in that period of time.
And so we're using the April 11th,
Correct.
not the April 25th. So I still am curious of like, if we, in the future, every quarter when this comes back, how do you pick which day, right? Like, do you see it April 11th? This is what it's saying, April 12th, April 13th, and there's a line that goes between the lines. And it's like, that's kind of our most probable.
Very good question. We picked the price that's a few hours before the deadline of giving the document to the clerk. Or literally the agenda.
You gotta pick some point.
Yeah.
I understand that. What I would like to see too in the future though is comparing like, so the orange line that we picked in January, and then what actually happened on the same graph. And then in 3 months, I'd like to see what actually happened and that yellow line that we picked on the same graph. And so we're gonna be doing this quarterly every time. I want to see trends. I want to keep an eye on how we're doing and what's going on.
She the math major.
We have the data, we'll put the graphs together.
But and I agree with you. I mean, I'd like to see it. The only thing I would comment is, like you say, if you were able to predict these things better than anything else, you wouldn't be sitting here. You'd be doing something else. These prices, you know, we didn't know what Putin was going to do in December.
I just don't want to be swinging crazy every 3 months. So I do want,
Remember,
maybe our next
The
meeting, we'll be able to talk about the rate stabilization fund. Is that too soon?
No, I think it's appropriate to talk about it. We'll touch on it tonight so people understand what it means. It doesn't necessarily mean that we would have money to put into it,
Right.
but hopefully we would be able to do that, right? And at that point, well, let's go through the calculations. And I'll show everybody where the stabilization fund would have come into effect if gas prices had not gone up, and what it might mean to us in the future.
Commissioner Stokes, if you look at the little one that says natural gas and then fiscal 2022 with the 4 lines, this one,
This one?
yeah, and then if you look at the graph that he gave us for Henry Hub natural gas, this one with all the different dates. If you go to August, which is what I did, and it was blue, and we guessed in August we were going to be at around $4, but August of last year they were at 407. Well, then in September they went up to 516. So this is real data for what was selling versus how we inaccurately guessed.
Right. I just want them on the same, so I can look at
Same
the
page.
curve, the area between the curves, if they're on the same page.
Like
I-
how bad of a deficit we were running versus
Yeah.
a profit
Yes.
or breaking even.
And I grabbed this data, I just did literally just a Google search, and I came upon the Thomson Reuters site. I did this literally about an hour ago, gave more detail. And we do a snip, cut and paste, and put it on the slide and present it tonight. That's how easy it is to get the data. We just drop it in the charts and have it ready to go. One of the things that we want to do, this is the first time that we're all doing this together, right? We've had a PCA in works for many years. I think Commissioner McBoy, going back to maybe 2014, may have been in these types of discussions, but nobody else in the room has been through this. This is the first time. We have to get good at this. We have to get good at putting the data together and presenting the data, and you'll have to get good at understanding it. We would like to have a very standard template, so it should be not a new exploration every quarter. We should standardize on a template that you would like to see.
So we guessed this much, but this was the actual, we were plus or minus X.
Correct. And we're also going to have variability. We're taking a guess at how much power we're going to sell to our customers
Right.
based on history. But that's a forecast as well. Maybe that's probably a better, more educated guess than your guess, because it's so repeatable.
Right. And I guess the only caution, I always like to see same things on the same graph, the actual and the predicted, that's a good idea. But I also would caution, you have to predict to do this.
Right.
And there's a mechanism built in with the B factor to adjust to the actual, and, you know, you catch up the next quarter to adjust it back. So, you know, I don't think we want to beat up anybody that, you know, they didn't guess the right direction, particularly because it's so many things that are totally out of control, you know, anybody's control.
Correct.
As far as the pricing, natural gas.
So if we go to the power cost adjustment calculator, and I believe I do have standing by Craig Shepard from Leidos as a lifeline if I need it. I'm gonna keep going on my own here, just in case.
You're doing great.
Voice up, thank you. Okay. I have a future in the business. Okay, so in item 3, we just shown you how we built up the 4.844 million of what we actually, or what we are projecting for the coming 3 months, and how that's driven by natural gas prices. So in line 4, now we're going to get into calculating what our true-up is of B. So in line 4, we look at and say, okay, for the period of October, which started our fiscal year, through February, we spent $5.6 million in PCA eligible expenses. So for the audience and certainly you can all look at your bills and you have a line item that says PCA. So we have PCA expenses. That's what it costs us to buy those things that are in that item. And then we have PCA revenues. That's what comes in on the bill. So we looked at our actual PCA expenses and they were $5.6 million. Revenues associated with the PCA for that period of time were $6.1 million. That could be a number of things. It could be that the original PCA was higher than actual costs, or there were more credits from a prior year, but we didn't have credits from a prior period because we were starting for the first time. So we're looking at $4.3 million. How do we get to the 4.3? We had a true amount of 490. So we over collected 490,000 from our customers. We take that $490,000 and we take it out of the coming 3-month forecast.
Right.
So it goes up as a credit.
Builds up as exactly. So the 490 is a credit to help lower the cost going forward. Now we project that we're going to sell 103,000 megawatt hours in that period of time. So we take the cost divided by the amount of megawatt hours that we expect to sell. And that gives us A plus B plus C divided by D, $41.93 per megawatt hour. So that's what we expect we need to recover from customers over the next 3-month period. Takes into account the credit for the prior period overpayment, and we get the $41.93. We then break that down in terms of dollars per kilowatt hour. We have a calculation there just below line 10. You see $41.93 per 1,000 kilowatt hours. What is that? That is our benchmark customer, is 1,000 kilowatt hour customer. That's the basis of comparison. So we can say, well, what does this all mean to me? One could argue, well, the benchmark customer might be 800, the benchmark customer might be 1,200, it might be 750, or whatever you want to say.
But that's the industry standard.
That's the industry standard, 1,000, and some people look at 1,200. But if you're 1,000 kilowatt hour customer, your fuel component is going to be $41.93. It was, or is today, $37. So if you look a little bit further down and say, well, what is the current PCA rate? And what would that customer pay? Well, today they're paying $37. We expect that we need to have them pay us $41.93 to cover our expenses for the coming 3-month period. And that takes into account the credit from the overpayment in the prior period. So the monthly change in bill, the PCA portion, which then adds up to the total bill, would be $4.93 increase for this typical 1,000 kilowatt hour customer. That's how we get to that number.
And if we didn't have the 490 in credit, it would be a little higher than that.
Absolutely, it would be a little bit higher.
So it's
maybe about
essentially
30% higher.
Price of a cup of coffee.
Correct, but we're all very sensitive to that.
Yeah, no, I know.
These are not joyful events coming
No,
to explain.
nobody likes this.
But I think we're trying to provide a lot of transparency, and certainly the five of you, and the manager, obviously, council, can join me at any time in my office, and we can go through these spreadsheets, so you feel much more comfortable with the numbers and have a sense of, you can see the unredacted agreements. I just can't send those out, but we can walk you through these, and we can walk you through and tie every one of these numbers back to an actual invoice that we received for meter reads for the month, extraction of data from Navaline, from our ERP system. It all ties back.
Now, suppose that so our projection is it's going to cost us a little bit more to bring power to people's homes. Suppose that we said, well, we're not going to raise the rates. Would we have to pay that bill at some point?
Oh, absolutely. We pay the bill every month. We pay it, I think, net 15 on the top of my head. We pay because we have to under contract. We pay the bill. So it's like going to the gas station and charging the, filling up your car and your credit card bills comes in, you say, oh, I'm not paying it because I don't like it. It's too much. Well, then you're going to pay penalties. You got to pay the bill.
Right.
If we don't collect it from our customers, we have to take it out of fund balance, and eventually it drills
Can't do
down,
that.
kills our working capital, our cash flow, and cash on hand.
And if you use a credit card at the pump, now you're paying what the pump is plus your interest.
Correct.
Commissioner Stokes has a question.
Similar to what you jumped in without using your light.
I know these guys. Have a little talk after the meeting.
I had a question about, I would like to see in these quarterly updates, what would our deficit be if we did nothing? So like right now, we're predicting that, I'm not saying I want to do nothing, but I think it would be helpful to actually say, okay, look, if we do nothing, like we're going in the hole $1 million. If our, according to our modeling.
That's about the number.
Okay, well, can we make that part of the
We-
standard presentation?
And these numbers are going to move. So like I said, we put the number together based on the number at the day of the staff reports were due for the agenda packet. And
Yeah.
last night it was significantly higher. Now, if we had come in here last night and said, hey, the market took a dive, I'd say, yeah, you might be okay, right? But clearly the market's going even higher. So we think the bill's going to be even higher than we used in this packet. So we think even if the market does follow through on what the signals are as of last night, and I didn't look at the market today, $7.20. So we'd say, arguably, we're under collecting for the 3 months.
Right.
This is our mechanism that is in our resolution.
Right.
You should follow.
Right.
We have adjustment periods for that. But what we're doing is we're limiting the amount of exposure to the utility from having collected far less money
Mhm.
than we need to pay our purchase power costs.
And this increase does not increase our profit. It just covers our expenses. Like if I go to the store and milk used to be whatever, and now it's more and I have to pay it. Essentially, is that
That's
correct?
absolutely correct. There is no contribution to general fund in this. There's no
Right.
staff salaries.
Okay.
This is nothing. This is purely the cost
Costs
of the
carry
power
on.
that we buy, that we resell our customers. If you will, our general fund contributions, our fixed cost recovery, that is all in our base energy charge. So there are 4 pieces of the bill. There's the customer charge, there's taxes, and there's base energy. Base energy is where all the fixed costs, that's where debt services, contribution, general fund, shared services, salaries, wires, all that kind of stuff, materials, poles, that's all buried in
We're gonna
that,
get in trouble.
that base energy charge. This is strictly just the cost of the power that we bought. We bought it at wholesale and we delivered to the customer, and that's it. Now, we talked about the stabilization fund. Commissioner Stokes mentioned that. I promised to come back and talk about that. What's the stabilization fund? Let's assume for the moment that natural gas prices were going to stay exactly as we had predicted them, and we now have a surplus of $490,000. We have a choice to make. Do we just hold the $490,000 in a separate account called the stabilization fund, a rainy day fund, in case prices were to go up in the future? Or do we give it back to customers in the form of a rate decrease? That would be at your discretion. We would have that discussion. I have talked to our finance director, Bruce Miller, about some concepts about what controls we would suggest around that. Because I think that controls would be important. We might suggest that there be some bandwidth or lanes that we swim between. For example, I would probably not suggest that we build up $5, $6, $7 million is a big crazy number in the stabilization fund. So that's for a really rainy day. I would say, hey, it goes above some amount. You would help, you're the commissioner, so you you make the policy decision. But we might recommend you say, if it goes above $1 million,
Start feeding.
start feeding it back to customers exactly the rate. That would be your choice.
Is that fund unfunded at this point?
Correct, it's unfunded. We have to actually set it up on the books and fund it.
But once we have it, then we don't have to necessarily swing, like increase
It down.
and then decrease, like increase every winter, decrease every summer and like go back and forth. We need that,
Well, I
is
think
meant to be there to help
Correct.
push in
It's a shock
those
absorber.
swings, the shot, yes.
Big shock is work. And now that would be your discretion. So we'll bring it at some point. It didn't happen to come this month, but we'll bring it at some point, and probably come with the finance director presentation is together with me, and the framework, and you could help guide us on what ultimately is the policy you want to have on that. Because that's strictly a policy matter.
So for example, we could have said, we could theoretically say to you, take 490, put in the bank.
Or take half of it.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Half back and
Right.
half throw in the pot.
And then we'd know how it would go up a little bit, few cents
Right.
more.
Now, good news, right?
Hmm.
I sit on the FMPA board, and at the board meeting, FMPA staff disclosed to FMPA board that the price, the all-in price for the ARP members would be probably in excess of 10 cents a kilowatt hour for this year. They are very, very gas intensive. We have this huge nuclear component, and we have a very aggressive supplemental contract. At the moment, we're expecting our wholesale prices for the year to be in the mid sixes. So many of the municipalities around the state that are covered under other types of agreements are going to be seeing substantially higher costs of wholesale power than we are. Now, that's not something to rejoice about. That's something for us to understand. And we are fortunate because of decisions that were made decades ago to invest heavily in nuclear. I know not everybody is a big proponent or believer in nuclear, but it is having a significant improvement or value right now, as it did in the other years when you saw natural gas prices so high. It's been a very, very valuable component of this portfolio and will continue to be at least through 2043. We can recheck at that time how that's worked out for us. But and I think that people who sit in these chairs 10 and 15 and 20 years from now will say, wow, that FMPA Solar 1 contract and FMPA Solar 2, and perhaps FMPA Solar 3 will prove to be very, very key decisions in the history of the city. Not just for the environmental benefits, of course, but certainly for the economic and stability, not being whipsawed by carbon prices.
Okay, I think we have, I see that light on.
Except I just took exactly what I was going to say. I just wanted less of a comment, more of a statement on, perhaps there's a little bit of irony in the volatility of fossil fuel prices. It's similar to the prediction of climate change often. And it's a difficult thing to button down. And this is I hope people out there understand that this is probably one of the biggest, arguments of why we're making these moves to renewable, because of the more stable costs involved. It's not just international conflicts, but I'm also seeing a lot of things in the environmental world in terms of natural gas specifically. Just in the last couple of weeks, there's a lot of movement on people moving away from it for health reasons, for all kinds of other reasons, not just environment and, financial as well, obviously. So moving away from natural
Oh, and I see, okay.
stoves inside their homes.
I just saw that too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I
I
love.
have a gas
I love
stove.
my
What are we
gas
saying?
stove, my gas stove,
Love my gas
Is
stove.
that
I love my gas stove. I love.
we all love our gas.
Is that very
but-
well? Mhm.
Microwaves are.
And as people move away from that, the price will probably just go up more. So you gotta keep.
Yeah, but I could
moves
take a
we're making.
shower and cook during a hurricane.
Right.
I mean, that
Everybody comes to our house.
Yeah.
gas is much better to cook on.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second, are all in favor?
I
Oh, wait, do we have any public comment? Madam Clerk?
We do not, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
We thought the Excel took out.
Knocked him off out. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. Ed, it's,
Thank you.
you
Very helpful.
explain things really helpfully and I appreciate it. I'm like, electricity for idiots, but you make it helpful. Moving on to item number C, which is the First Amendment to the L.E. Myers Work Order number 9. Mr. Liberty.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Seventh Avenue North Substation is the first new substation we built in 50 years. And it's nearing completion. It'll be going hot within the next week or two. And we'll begin moving customers over to it probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks or so. That'll be the most fortified substation. There's going to be two places you want to be. You want to be in a circuit fed from 7th Avenue North. And if a real big hurricane comes, you want to be in the control house that's at 7th Avenue North, which only 3 or 4 of us will actually fit in because it's small. But my point is, it'll be a village substation. And it looks very impressive. Unfortunately, the brand new wall, which is graffiti, we are talking with the folks here in the city about having an artist prepare a mural. So, which will eliminate the blank canvas that appears that has suddenly become, which we didn't want to do. But the costs here that we're looking for recovery on are construction things that came up, interferences between the design drawings, the actual fuel conditions, additional holes that had to be drilled, some changes in wire lines, things that were just not predicted 100% in the design. It's additional dollars.
Okay.
Will there be a ribbon cutting for this?
We have not specifically planned one, but yes, we.
Let's have a
should
party.
It's
Yeah.
I think we should have a party. You just said it's the first one built in 30-something
Right.
years.
probably 50 years.
We can have a giant
It was
light
built in
switch.
1970s.
See where- So people can see where the money's really being spent and, I mean, we
Where
sit
on
here and talk about it.
It was almost by the radio tower, the big field of radio towers, like across the street from that.
7th Avenue North.
I'm sorry, it's going to be west of 95.
Thank you.
In the industrial.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah.
Commercial Park Complex, exactly.
Okay.
A lot of brand new stuff there, a lot of big new concrete poles, big pole. It's very impressive.
I'm only gonna approve if we have a party.
That's what I was saying about the solar. Why does Ed Liberty hate parties?
Does your wife know you
I
hate
retract
parties?
that. I retract my statement.
I think we should have a party. All in favor of a party, say aye.
Maybe she's seen what happens to me.
Oh, there we go. And is there
If you think I'm boring here, wait till you get to a party with me.
motion
Who
to,
wants to talk to the engineer at the party? No?
motion to approve with a party?
Do we have any public comment? Madam
I do
Clerk?
not.
Thank you. Years and years ago, I represented the guy that got the first cell phone tower, the lease for the first cell phone tower up at that industrial park. It's come a long way. Alrighty, motion to approve.
Yes,
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
aye.
Thank you very much.
Let's have party.
Is there a projected date, Ed, when this will be completed?
We're going to start. I had to get the dates. They move by a few days all the time.
Just ready to plan the party?
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's in the next 10 days or so.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
There we go.
I'm sure the crew that we have people in our own staff that's been working on this, right?
We have extensive our engineering staff has been on it. and
Yes, I
our
think that
substation
everybody, I think that
company.
staff should be there.
How many people?
We're all in on the party, so
But
you don't
we've
have
got
to
about a
come if
dozen
you don't
people on
want.
staff, and then we've had a lot of contractors, Melanie Myers and the constructors actually constructing it to the board, a lot of concrete, set a lot of steel.
But do we have about 12 of our staff?
Between our engineering staff and our IBW folks, there's probably been about a dozen people who worked. on the
I'm
project.
being serious. We need to celebrate
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
We'll set something up.
Yes.
No balloons though.
No
No balloons.
Or iguanas.
My alarm will okay, right?
BB guns.
We'll bring lots of curry.
No flamethrowers?
Take as many iguanas you want.
How do you feel?
Ed?
Three iguanas.
This is why he brings to parties.
He doesn't go to parties.
Oh, boy.
So where are we? D. Okay, item D. Ratification of work order number 60 with Newcat Corp for emergency repairs on the canal substation transformer.
I hate the
This
word
is the one
emergency
that
and electric.
You've
together.
mentioned before that went south.
Correct. This is the large transformer that feeds the western portion of our territory. What we call the load tap changer. This is the device that actually regulates outgoing voltage to our customers. That device failed, I believe, on a Saturday night a month plus ago. We had to take it out of service, did inspections, found that it had failed internally. We did emergency repairs, and this is just ratifying repair work was done on an emergency basis. We've now invested money in this thing, so we're probably going to wind up keeping it as a spare, even though there are 2 new transformers on order to replace this. So this is what we call TD70 is our internal designation for this transformer. TD71 and TD72 are on order. They're about $1.25 million each. And they're part of the whole new substation and switchyard that we're building at this location.
This is different though than the mobile unit that you were talking about for
The
the,
mobile was anticipated as something that we might need to roll there on an emergency basis if we could not find parts and make these repairs, which we have been able to find.
oh, so
parts
this is
to
the
make
same
repairs.
project. Okay,
Right.
great.
pool is of interest to us for other reasons down the road.
Yeah, I like that idea.
I have that in my mind as something we want to
Commissioner
find
Malega.
in the tree one day.
I just want to say that, I don't know if you guys checked out New Cat's logo at the top. Did you see their logo at the top of their estimate?
It's pretty cute.
It's a very cute cat. That's all I had to say.
Okay, thank you. Any public comment, ma'am?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. E. These sound like old songs. Work order number 3 with Hooper Corp. for Main Yard Control House Construction Services. Mr. Liberty.
Yes, this item is actually build or construct on site, assemble the control house. So the main yard right now has a lot of outdoor controls and outdoor cabinets. And some of the items are actually in the old system operations building. The control house will be a category 5 climate controlled building set on a concrete pad at the site. The control house itself is being prefabbed off site and will arrive. This contract is not to make the control house, but actually install it, assemble it, and get it fully operational together with our own engineering and IBW substation staff and various people in the organization.
We kind of need to do it.
Motion to approve, because he said so.
Are there any public comments, Madam Clerk? Okay,
Sorry, there are not.
okay. Do motion by Commissioner Malega, second by Commissioner McBoyd. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Moving on. Could we, is the screen showing you, with people watching, are they watching you, Mrs. Coyne, or are they, what do they see? They might want to
They
watch.
see you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, I was just curious.
After all, we all dressed up.
We are dressed up tonight. It was the Melissa Coyne show. Okay, purchase order with systems with intelligence. I want
Yep,
those.
Scotty. I get a couple of them for my house.
Can we get a couple of them? Mr. Liberty.
Okay, this item is basically a security and thermography or thermal imaging security system for the new Canal Road or substation and transmission station. So these are the cameras that are going to be monitoring the site for security purposes. They also will have infrared detecting capability, which is important because it will actually feed into our SCADA system control and data acquisition. So if there's a hotspot that's indicated in the equipment, it's going to be
Oh, they'll see it.
and security, of course, is very important because this is going to be a critical facility, part of the critical infrastructure, part of our bulk electric system. So security of this site is extremely important, and that's what this expenditure is for. It's to purchase the equipment necessary for security at the new station. We have to order this stuff in advance, get it all here, so we start construction. We're ready to go and install this stuff.
Thank you. I see Commissioner Malega.
My only question is, when I read through this, I could not find, is this including image backup? How long are these images held on file? Like if there's something that happens over the weekend, do we have the ability to go back and recapture?
Yes, we do. I just don't know the exact period of capture. I do have some lifelines on the phone, either Walt or Paul Nicholas.
I couldn't find it anywhere.
The actual retention period for the video would be great to know, particularly the stuff would be stored on a drive and a server and then moved to another device. But Walt, do you have?
Or is it going to a cloud or?
Or Paul?
Hello?
Walt,
Yes, good evening, Commissioners, Madam Mayor. The imagery will be backed up and stored on servers. I do not know the exact duration of what that backup would be, but it will be retrievable. And we can get you that answer.
But Paul, it's our own servers or cloud-based?
It's going to be our own servers, so it'll all be controlled in-house. No outside access.
Okay, yeah, I knew that because that's the whole point of having the security. Yeah, I was just wondering how long we were going to keep it on file, like if something happened in a 72-hour period or, I mean.
Probably longer.
Yeah, it'll be much longer than that. I would imagine probably, I would say a minimum of a couple years, but we can find, I can find out, and we can get you an answer on that.
That's good. No, because some of them will only keep the data for 7 days, 12 days, 14, then they delete it. Okay, that's it.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no, it'll be much longer than that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Systems with intelligence and memory. I assume, is it correct that this is also partly a regulation requirement that we have this because it's a critical thing, or is this our own choice?
Security is certainly required, badge access. I'm not 100% sure whether video security is 100% required, but certainly
Some degree,
security is necessary.
the overall security.
And this is a small price to pay for this kind of technology.
Really.
Motion to approve?
Second.
By Commissioner Malega, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to number
G.
G. Task order number 13 with WGI to complete surveying services for the Intracoastal Waterway distribution crossing. Liberty.
Yes, this is an item that we had discussed in the prior meeting as we get ready to design. We do some survey work out there, and Watson Group International and WGI is the company that we've selected to do the survey work.
This is the one that's going under the Untitled out to the,
Correct, our new beach time.
That will be actually in a sleeve, not just laying on the floor.
yes.
And
And are we doing, I assume this survey work, I know that Brian has an interest in it for running a water pipe across as well. The survey work will serve for both purposes, I assume.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The whole, what we wanted to do is get the economies of scale. We don't want to be in a situation where we do something and then 6 months later or 6 years later, Brian said, yeah, I need to pipe down. We can go do survey work. So we'd like to do that a lot of time. Sure.
And we last night kayaked across some of that so we can help.
Okay.
Get your hard hat with your little spotlight on it.
See any bubbles?
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
do some hot spots.
Any public comment, Madam Clerk?
No, Madam Mayor.
Do I have a motion
Motion
to,
approved.
thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, by Commissioner Diaz, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much. Moving on, last but not least, H. Second amendment with Distrans Steel LLC for the Canal 138 kV switchyard steel structures. Mr. Liberty.
Okay, so as we proceed through the design process, we designed the steel structures that we're going to need for the new station, as well as all the silt structures and entrances and exits and driveways and plantings, all that kind of stuff. This is simply the steel that we're going to need, and it's prefabricated so that they're not actually cutting and welding on site. It comes in prefab, and I'm not going to say it's as easy as an erector set, but stuff comes in prefab, ready to bolt up. So Distran is the provider of the steel.
So this is for the 7th Avenue North.
No, I'm saying just
For
for
the
the main, the canal
Oh.
station, all the
Oh, 'cause
western portion of the territory, where that TD7
Okay.
transformer
Yep,
is, and
I
the
see it.
transformers are going in. This is where the new tie line will be coming in
Right.
into this brand new transmission yard. And this is the steel for that yard.
Any public comment, Madam Clerk?
There is not, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, by Commissioner Diaz, seconded by,
Sorry.
come on, it's yours.
Second.
Reluctantly by
Everyone's on a
Commissioners.
roll tonight.
I know they're, we gotta go to this side a little bit, got a little evenness.
Yes, even it out.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. It passes unanimously.
Do we get a tour sometime of all the different places?
Yeah.
So when you say canal, et cetera,
Right.
we'll all know.
Haven't done the tour yet?
We can, we'd be very glad to have you all out there. What I would suggest is if you go as a group, that constitutes a meeting, I
Right.
believe, it would be publicly noticed and the public.
Look at her holding her eyes. She's like, please.
Our head just
So,
exploded.
I would suggest, and I know one or more of you have at times asked to come on tours, I would be glad to set aside, just let me know what works in your calendar. My advice would be to probably set aside at least 3 to 4 hours if you want to multiple facilities and you want to hear me talk. And there's a lot of staff that would be,
Yeah.
frankly, I think, would be impressed to see all of you out there and be able to have that exposure to you as well, and for you to be exposed to them and have that.
Yeah.
I'm exposed to the iguanas and the birds
Right,
and
exactly.
the wires and the.
And the staff does they do a great job, and they do it in anonymity in many of our
Right.
spots. So I think it'd be nice to have you come out and take a tour.
No, we love it. We love
Can
it.
we be brought up in a bucket? I'm just kidding.
I know.
We have done that on occasion.
An absolute way to learn how to use the street sweepers.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
But if you let Sylvina know what days are available, what times, and then she'll be in touch with me and we'll set that up.
Cool.
To have you see some of these locations.
Anything else while we're all here together? Anything anyone wants to say?
Brian ran out the door as soon as the consent agenda was approved. He's like, I'm out.
Each of those items.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Liberty.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very
And,
helpful explanation.
Thank you to my team on the phone.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you for
yeah.
being here via Zoom.
I drove by.
We all just expected to be there when we turn on the lights, and there's these invisible, like every other department in the city, there's these invisible people that just like make it work, and we're very grateful for that.
Drove by this morning by the Tri-Rail station, the work being done there. It's looking really good, so.
Yep.
I think I got pictures, but I was driving of the new poles.
Now you drive.
You were not taking pictures while you were driving?
Somebody in the car took the pictures.
Yeah.
And I trying to get somebody, I was.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
We haven't heard any motions from Kim, but she's gonna say that one.